One of the major parts of a tank is its engine. It's an expensive, sophisticated, and needy device. In the early 20th century, when ground vehicles were small and cheap, one could make do with bus or truck engines. But tanks grew quickly, getting heavier, and the military wanted more and more capabilities. Soon it became evident that those machines needed their own motors, something more reliable and lasting than aircraft engines, but smaller and stronger than truck ones. The Americans were among the first to realize that. The US wasn't mass-producing tanks in the interwar period, but their engineers were already testing various designs. Those designs were later used to make the actual engines of war. It's important to know, though, that they weren't working on dedicated tank engines. The engineers placed their bets on aircraft radial engines. The first issues with that arose when the United States joined the Big War and those engines became scarce. Medium tanks used a star-shaped engine with 400 horsepower. Continental was making 450 of those a month. Was that a lot? Well, the Detroit factory alone was making 600 Shermans every month. Once they even set a record of 907 tanks. And that was just one factory, albeit a very big one. There was another issue. Aircraft radial engines were picky about their fuel. Early radial engines used gasoline with an octane rating of 87, but were later adapted to 76. It doesn't sound special today, but back then engines would usually settle on lower numbers. German tanks, for instance, could use 68 octane gasoline. Actually, their engines could seemingly use anything that wasn't pure water. Now, 87 octane was simply too expensive. So the Americans started looking for an alternative to the needy radial engines. General Motors proposed a combo of two inline two-stroke diesel engines. They'd been used on boats before and had a good reputation, so no extra issues were expected. However, the US military preferred gasoline, so the diesel M4A2s were supplied to the Soviet and British armies instead. The American Army used the M4A3 with the Ford engines. That engine was basically an aircraft V12 shortened to just 8 cylinders. It was strong, it was compact, and it used less fuel than older radial engines. The most unique motor, however, was the M4A4. Chrysler had no suitable engines on hand, so their engineers proposed the multibank, an assembly of 5 car engines. Together with the radiator, this wonder had a mass of 2.5 tons and an output of 425 horsepower. For example, the Panther's engine was only 1,200 kilograms and could produce 700 horsepower. The multibank was also huge and couldn't fit the engine compartment, so the tank had to get a new, longer one. The resulting build looked pretty ludicrous, but it worked surprisingly well. The tank could still move even after losing 12 out of 30 cylinders. The American Army didn't really need the M4A4. The regular Shermans were enough. The Soviet specialists didn't like it either, since it needed too much fuel. So the multi-bank tanks went to the British. You can imagine their first reaction. How on earth do we even service that? Soon, however, they found the tanks to be pretty reliable and forgiving. The machines served well in Normandy. After the war, the American engineers considered the new experience and began designing special tank engines. But that's a story we've already shared in one of our previous episodes.